Ethan sat on the couch, scrolling aimlessly through his phone while Sophie was getting ready. The sounds of her shuffling in the bedroom were routine, but tonight felt different. When Sophie finally emerged, Ethan looked up, and his breath caught. She was wearing a sleek black dress that hugged her figure, with heels he hadn't seen her wear in years. Her hair was styled perfectly, and her makeup was bold but tasteful. A sultry, musky perfume wafted into the room as she adjusted her earrings. "Wow," Ethan managed, masking his surprise. "You look incredible. What's the occasion?" Sophie smiled briefly. "Just a gathering with friends. Nothing big." Ethan's stomach tightened. Sophie wasn't the type to get dressed up like this for a casual night out. "What time do you think you'll be back?" he asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. "Not too late," she said, avoiding his gaze as she grabbed her purse and left without another word. The sound of the door closing reverberated through the quiet apartment. Ethan sat frozen, his mind racing. By midnight, Ethan was pacing. His unease grew with every minute that ticked by. When the clock struck 2:13 a.m., the sound of the key turning in the lock jolted him. Sophie stepped in, her lipstick faded, her hair slightly disheveled. She smelled of wine and something heavier, bourbon maybe. "Had fun?" Ethan asked, his voice laced with forced casualness. Sophie froze momentarily, then nodded. "Yeah. Sorry, it ran later than I thought." She disappeared into the bedroom before he could ask more. Ethan followed but didn't press. He lay awake long after Sophie's soft breathing indicated she had fallen asleep. The next day, Ethan noticed subtle shifts in Sophie's behavior. She was glued to her phone, smiling at messages she didn't share. Whenever he asked who she was texting, she brushed him off with vague answers. "Work stuff," she'd say, or "it's just Sarah." Ethan's unease grew. One evening, when Sophie went to the kitchen, Ethan saw her laptop open on the couch. He hesitated, his heart pounding, before his curiosity got the better of him. Clicking on her messaging app, he froze. There was a chat with someone named Liam. The messages weren't overtly incriminating, but they carried an undeniable intimacy. "Liam, last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. Sophie, asterisk you're going to get me into trouble, winky face asterisk." Ethan quickly closed the laptop, his hands trembling as Sophie returned. She didn't seem to notice anything amiss, but Ethan's mind was spiraling. Who was Liam? What had Sophie done last night? The following week, Sophie dressed up again, this time in a red dress he didn't recognize. Her excuses about "just the girls" rang hollow. When she left, Ethan grabbed his keys and decided to follow her. Staying far enough behind to avoid detection, he tailed her to a rooftop bar downtown. Ethan parked and waited, watching as Sophie stepped out of her car and met a man near the entrance. His heart sank as the man leaned in, placing a hand on her waist. It was Liam. Ethan's stomach churned as he watched them head inside. For what felt like an eternity, he debated going in. Finally, he made his way to the bar, keeping a low profile. He found a spot near the back where he could see Sophie and Liam laughing at a corner table. The way Liam leaned in, his hand brushing Sophie's arm, and the way she smiled back made Ethan feel physically ill. That night, Ethan confronted Sophie as soon as she walked through the door. "Who's Liam?" he demanded, his voice trembling with rage. Sophie's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "I followed you tonight," Ethan snapped. "I saw you with him. Don't lie to me." Sophie stammered, her usual composure crumbling. "Ethan, it's not what it looks like." "Then what is it?" he shouted. "Because it looks like my wife is cheating on me." Tears welled in Sophie's eyes as she admitted she'd been meeting Liam. "It's not physical," she insisted. "We're just talking." Ethan's laugh was bitter. "Talking? You're sneaking around in dresses you don't wear for me, staying out until 2 in the morning, and you call it talking?" Sophie begged him to understand, claiming she felt neglected and was seeking something she couldn't explain. But Ethan wasn't interested in her excuses. The final straw came when he saw a photo on social media, posted by one of Sophie's friends. It showed Sophie and Liam at the bar, their arms around each other, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. When Ethan confronted her with the photo, Sophie broke down, admitting to an emotional affair but insisting it hadn't gone further. "It didn't mean anything," she pleaded. "I was just lost." Ethan stared at her, the woman he had loved and trusted, now a stranger. "It meant something to me," he said quietly, walking out of the room. For the first time in years, Ethan felt utterly alone. Ethan sat at the dining table, staring at Sophie's phone, which she had carelessly left on the kitchen counter. He had promised himself not to snoop again after the incident with her laptop, but the unease that had plagued him for weeks had reached a boiling point. Her late nights, evasive answers, and the name Liam echoed in his mind like a warning bell. Tonight, she had gone out once more, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts and her phone. He hesitated for a moment before unlocking it using the passcode he had memorized long ago, back when trust hadn't been a question between them. What he found hit him like a gut punch. The messages from Liam were numerous and spanned months. They weren't just flirtatious, they were explicit. "Liam, I can't stop thinking about last weekend. You were incredible. Sophie, you make me feel alive, Liam. I don't know what I'd do without you. Liam, wish I could kiss you right now." Ethan's hands trembled as he scrolled further. There were photos, some of Sophie smiling at the camera in the lingerie he'd never seen her wear, others of Liam in what appeared to be his apartment. One photo showed them together, Sophie leaning into Liam with a smile that Ethan hadn't seen in years. The timestamp was from the same night she had told Ethan she was working late. He thought it couldn't get worse until he found the videos. The first was of Sophie sitting across from Liam at a candlelit dinner, her laugh ringing out as she leaned forward to touch his hand. Another showed them in a hotel room. Sophie was holding the phone, the camera angled toward a bed where Liam lay shirtless, pulling her closer. Ethan slammed the phone down, bile rising in his throat. This wasn't a fleeting mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a calculated betrayal, nurtured over time. The next day, Ethan couldn't look Sophie in the eye. She breezed through the morning, humming softly as she prepared breakfast, oblivious to the storm brewing inside him. Ethan didn't say a word. He needed time to think, to decide how to confront her without breaking down completely. That evening, while Sophie was in the shower, Ethan sat at her laptop again. This time, he wasn't hesitant. He navigated to her email and found a folder labeled Personal. Inside were more messages from Liam, along with itineraries for trips they had taken together. Some of the trips coincided with the weekends Sophie had claimed to be visiting her sister. He opened one email thread and immediately wished he hadn't. "Liam, that cabin was perfect. I can still feel you against me by the fire. Sophie, you're bad for me, Liam, but I don't care. I'd do it all over again." The emails painted a vivid picture of their affair. Romantic weekends, stolen moments, whispered promises. Each word was a dagger, cutting deeper into the foundation of Ethan's marriage. The confrontation came 2 days later. Ethan couldn't hold it in any longer. As Sophie walked into the living room, he was sitting on the couch, her phone and laptop open in front of him. His expression was cold, his voice steady. "Who is Liam?" Sophie froze, the color draining from her face. "Ethan, I can explain." "But just tell me the truth," he interrupted, his voice rising. "How long has this been going on?" She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her silence was answer enough. "I saw everything," Ethan continued, his anger barely contained. "The messages, the photos, the videos. You didn't even try to hide it, Sophie." Tears welled up in her eyes, but Ethan felt no sympathy. "How could you do this to me? To us? Was I that terrible? Was I not enough for you?" "It wasn't like that," Sophie choked out. I didn't mean for it to happen." "Don't insult my intelligence," Ethan snapped. "This wasn't a mistake, Sophie. This was deliberate. You planned trips, you lied to my face, He stopped, his voice breaking. "I was unhappy," Sophie whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I felt invisible. Liam made me feel wanted, alive. And I didn't?" Ethan shot back. "I built a life with you, Sophie. I trusted you. And you threw it all away for what? A fling with a salesman?" Her face crumpled at his words, but Ethan didn't relent. "Do you even know what you've done? The humiliation I feel? The shame of knowing my wife was living a double life while I sat here like a fool, believing your lies? The days that followed were a blur of tension and heartbreak. Sophie begged for forgiveness, promising to end things with Liam, but Ethan couldn't bring himself to believe her. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the videos, the photos, the messages. He imagined the two of them laughing at his expense, mocking the man who had trusted her completely. The humiliation didn't end at home. Ethan soon realized that some of Sophie's friends had known about the affair and had covered for her. The thought of people pitying him, whispering behind his back, made his blood boil. He couldn't escape the humiliation, not even at work, where his coworkers noticed his distracted demeanor and asked if everything was okay. One evening, Sophie handed Ethan her phone, tears streaming down her face. "Here, go through it. I've deleted everything. I'm done with him, Ethan. Please, let's try to fix this." Ethan stared at the phone, his heart aching with a mix of love and anger. "Do you think deleting a few messages changes anything? Do you think I can just forget what I've seen?" "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'll do anything to make it right." "Anything?" Ethan asked, his voice cold. "Then tell me this. When you were with him, did you ever think about me? Did you ever feel guilty?" Sophie's silence was deafening. Ethan didn't know if he could ever forgive her. The betrayal was too deep, the wounds too raw. He spent his nights replaying every moment, every sign he had missed. He hated the way Liam's name now haunted him, the way Sophie's laughter in his memories felt like a mockery. And worst of all, he hated how much he still loved her despite everything she had done. Sophie sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her face was pale, her eyes darting toward Ethan, who stood towering above her, his arms crossed and his expression a mixture of fury and pain. The silence between them was suffocating. Sophie shifted uncomfortably, but Ethan refused to let her escape the weight of the moment. "I'm going to ask you again," he said, his voice cold and unrelenting. "Who is Liam?" Sophie swallowed hard, her throat dry. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, avoiding his gaze. "Don't lie to me." Ethan's voice cracked like a whip, making her flinch. "I've seen the messages, Sophie. I've seen the photos. I've seen the videos. I know everything." For a brief moment, Sophie looked as if she might try to deny it again, but the intensity in Ethan's eyes broke through her defenses. Her shoulders slumped, and she exhaled shakily. "It's not what you think," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What I think," Ethan spat, his voice trembling with rage, "is that my wife of 10 years has been screwing some tech salesman behind my back. What I think is that you've been lying to me for months, maybe longer, while I sat here like an idiot, trusting you." Sophie's lips quivered, but no words came. "Say something," Ethan shouted, his voice raw. "At least have the decency to tell me the truth." Tears spilled down Sophie's cheeks as she finally broke. "I did it. I had an affair. Are you happy now?" Ethan froze, the words hitting him like a sledgehammer. He had expected the confession, but hearing it from her lips was a different kind of pain. "How long?" he demanded, his voice barely above a whisper. "A few months," Sophie admitted, her voice shaking. "It wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't mean for it to." "Don't give me that." Ethan cut her off. "You didn't mean for it to happen? What does that even mean? You accidentally ended up in his bed? You accidentally lied to me over and over again." Sophie flinched at the venom in his voice. "I was lonely, Ethan," she cried. "You don't understand what it's been like. You're always working, always distracted. I felt invisible." Ethan's laugh was cold and bitter. "Invisible? That's your excuse? You felt invisible, so you decided to betray me? To humiliate me? I wasn't trying to humiliate you." Sophie shot back, her tears turning into anger. I needed something. I needed to feel alive again." "Alive?" Ethan repeated, his voice dripping with disbelief. "And you couldn't come to me? You couldn't talk to your husband?" "No, you went to him. Some sleazy salesman who probably laughs at me every time he sees you walk out of his apartment." "It wasn't like that." Sophie insisted, but her voice cracked, betraying her guilt. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low and menacing. "Then what was it like, Sophie? Tell me. Did you love him? Did you talk about me? Did you laugh at me together?" Sophie shook her head violently. No. It wasn't like that. I didn't love him. It was just an escape. An escape, Ethan repeated, the word tasting bitter in his mouth. You escaped our life. You escaped me. Sophie buried her face in her hands, sobbing. I didn't mean to hurt you, Ethan. I swear. I didn't think it would go this far. Ethan's eyes burned with anger. You didn't think it would go this far? You didn't think at all, Sophie? Did you think about what would happen if I found out? Did you think about how I'd feel, knowing my wife was sneaking around, lying to my face? I'm sorry, Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible. Sorry? Ethan's voice rose again. You're sorry? That's all you have to say? Sophie looked up at him, her tear-streaked face full of desperation. I don't know what else to say, Ethan. I can't take it back. I can't undo what I did. Ethan stared at her, his jaw clenched. Why him? He asked, his voice suddenly quiet. Sophie hesitated, then sighed. Liam was attentive. He made me feel special, like I mattered. Ethan's hands balled into fists. And I didn't? After everything I've done for you, everything I've given you, I didn't make you feel special? Sophie shook her head. It wasn't about you, Ethan. It was about me. I felt like I was fading away, and Liam, he noticed me. Ethan let out a bitter laugh. He noticed you. Of course he did. He noticed a bored, lonely housewife he could manipulate into bed. It wasn't like that, Sophie protested weakly. Then what was it like? Ethan demanded. Tell me, Sophie. What was it like sneaking around, lying to me, sharing your body with him while I sat here, oblivious? Did it feel good? Did it make you happy? Sophie's sobs grew louder, but Ethan didn't relent. I want to know, Sophie. I want to know how you justified it. How you looked me in the eye every day and told me you loved me while you were with him. I didn't think. Sophie cried, her voice breaking. I didn't think about what I was doing or who I was hurting. I just wanted to feel something. Ethan stared at her, his heart breaking all over again. You wanted to feel something? Well, congratulations, Sophie. Now I feel something too. I feel betrayed. I feel humiliated. I feel like my entire marriage has been a lie. Sophie reached for him, but Ethan stepped back, his expression one of pure disgust. Don't touch me, he said coldly. I can't even look at you right now. Sophie collapsed onto the couch, her sobs echoing through the room. Ethan turned away, his chest heaving as he fought to control his emotions. He had never felt so broken, so defeated. As he walked out of the room, Sophie's cries followed him, but he didn't look back. He didn't know if he could ever look at her the same way again. Ethan sat alone in the dim light of the living room, staring blankly at the stack of documents in front of him. The weight of what he was about to do pressed on his chest like a boulder. Filing for divorce wasn't a decision he had come to lightly, but after Sophie's confession and the haunting evidence of her betrayal, there was no other option. She had destroyed the trust that bound them together, and Ethan couldn't see a way back. The anger and humiliation he felt every time he replayed Sophie's lies in his head only solidified his resolve. He wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. She had chosen Liam, chosen her double life, and now she would face the consequences. Ethan had always been fair and kind, but this time, he knew he needed to fight for what was his. The following day, he reached out to a lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Claire who came highly recommended by one of his colleagues. She was sharp, confident, and had a reputation for being relentless in divorce proceedings. Gather everything you can, Claire instructed during their first meeting. Messages, emails, photos, bank records, anything that paints a clear picture of her infidelity. The stronger the evidence, the better position we'll be in to negotiate the terms. Ethan nodded grimly. I have plenty, he replied. You won't believe the things I've found. Over the next few weeks, Ethan immersed himself in building his case. Every moment Sophie had lied to him, every message she had sent to Liam, every dollar she had spent during their secret trips, it was all there, meticulously documented. He felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness as he compiled the evidence. It was painful to see the extent of her betrayal laid out so plainly, but it also gave him the strength to move forward. The confrontation came late one evening. Sophie was sitting at the dining table, scrolling through her phone, when Ethan placed a thick envelope in front of her. She looked up at him, confused, and then hesitantly opened it. Her eyes widened as she pulled out the divorce papers. "You can't be serious," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Oh, I'm very serious," Ethan replied, his tone icy. "Did you think I'd just forgive you? That we could go back to how things were?" Sophie's hands shook as she flipped through the documents. "Ethan, please," she pleaded. "We can work through this. I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, counseling, anything. Don't throw everything away." "You already threw everything away," Ethan shot back, his voice rising. "You destroyed our marriage the moment you decided to cheat. This is on you, Sophie, not me." She opened her mouth to protest, but Ethan cut her off. "Don't even try to deny it. I have everything. The messages, the photos, the videos. Do you want me to list the dates of your little rendezvous with Liam? Or maybe I should bring up the weekend you lied about visiting your sister?" Sophie's face crumpled with shame, and she buried her head in her hands. "It was a mistake," she sobbed. "I wasn't thinking." "Don't," Ethan growled. "I'm done listening to your excuses. This is happening, Sophie. You'll sign those papers and we'll move on." As the legal process unfolded, Ethan took satisfaction in how prepared he was. Claire had used the evidence he'd provided to build an airtight case. Sophie, on the other hand, was caught off guard. She had no legal representation initially, thinking she could reason with Ethan. But when she realized how much was at stake, she scrambled to find a lawyer of her own. The first mediation session was tense. Ethan and Sophie sat across from each other at a polished table, their lawyers flanking them. Sophie looked pale and anxious, while Ethan remained stone-faced. "Let's begin with the division of assets," Claire said, her tone professional yet firm. "Given the evidence of infidelity, my client has a strong case for retaining the marital home, the joint savings, and the vehicle." Sophie's lawyer, a younger man who seemed unsure of himself, cleared his throat. "My client doesn't agree with these terms. She contributed to this marriage too?" "Contributed?" Ethan interjected, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You mean by sneaking around with Liam while I paid the bills and took care of everything?" "Ethan," Sophie whispered, her voice filled with embarrassment. "Please don't do this." "Oh, I'm doing this," he replied coldly. "You don't get to play the victim now." The negotiation dragged on for hours. Sophie's lawyer tried to argue for a more equitable split, but Claire was relentless. She presented the evidence with precision, making it clear that Sophie's actions had violated the trust that formed the basis of their marriage. The mediator, visibly uncomfortable with the tension in the room, eventually leaned in Ethan's favor. By the end of the session, Sophie looked defeated. She had agreed to let Ethan keep the house, the savings, and the car. In exchange, she was allowed to take a few personal items and her own savings account, which was significantly smaller. The humiliation didn't stop there. Word of their divorce spread quickly among their friends and family, and while Ethan remained silent about the details, Sophie wasn't so lucky. People began piecing things together, especially when Liam's name surfaced. Sophie's friends distanced themselves, and even her own family expressed disappointment in her actions. At work, Sophie struggled to maintain her composure. Her coworkers whispered behind her back, and she often caught them exchanging knowing glances. The shame was written all over her face. Ethan, meanwhile, focused on rebuilding his life. The house that had once been a painful reminder of Sophie now became a sanctuary. He redecorated, removed every trace of her, and found solace in the support of friends and colleagues. They rallied around him, offering encouragement and reminding him that he deserved better. The final court hearing was brief but emotionally charged. Ethan sat silently as the judge reviewed the terms of their divorce. Sophie avoided his gaze, her shoulders hunched in defeat. When the judge officially dissolved their marriage, Ethan felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. It was over. The life they had built together was gone, replaced by something unrecognizable. As they left the courthouse, Sophie hesitated, looking as though she wanted to say something. But Ethan didn't stop. He walked away without a backward glance, determined to leave her betrayal in the past. For the first time in months, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he knew he was strong enough to face it. Sophie had taken so much from him, but she hadn't taken everything. Ethan still had his dignity, his resilience, and the chance to start over. Ethan had tried to keep his focus on moving forward, but every time he thought about Liam, anger bubbled up inside him. This man, this smug, opportunistic parasite, had waltzed into his life, ripped apart his marriage, and walked away unscathed. Sophie might have been the one who betrayed him, but Liam had been an eager accomplice. The thought of him carrying on as if nothing had happened, continuing his life while Ethan picked up the pieces of his own, was intolerable. Ethan knew he couldn't let it go. He wasn't a vengeful man by nature, but Liam deserved consequences. And Ethan was going to make sure he got them. The first step in his plan was finding out more about Liam. Ethan remembered snippets from Sophie's messages, mentions of Liam's girlfriend, Claire. Sophie had once written to Liam about feeling jealous of Claire's perfect life, and Ethan had stored the name away, unsure if he'd ever need it. Now it was his most valuable lead. A bit of digging online, paired with what Ethan already knew about Liam's work as a tech salesman, led him to Claire's profile. She was a teacher at a local high school, her social media filled with photos of her students, classroom decorations, and occasional posts with Liam. They looked happy, but the knowledge of what Liam had been doing behind her back made Ethan's stomach churn. Ethan hesitated before messaging her. He knew this was crossing a line, that he was about to detonate Claire's life just as his own had been. But he also knew she deserved to know the truth. The message was short and direct. "Hi Claire, I'm Ethan. You don't know me, but I have information about your boyfriend, Liam, that I think you need to see. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but I've discovered that Liam has been having an affair with my now ex-wife, Sophie. If you'd like to talk, I can provide proof." Ethan attached a few screenshots of Liam's messages to Sophie and waited. He didn't have to wait long. Less than an hour later, Claire replied, "This can't be true. Liam would never do something like that. How do I know you're not lying?" Ethan felt a pang of guilt but pushed it aside. "I'll send you everything," he wrote back. And he did. Photos, videos, and the most damning messages between Sophie and Liam. The silence after that was deafening. For a moment, Ethan thought she might not respond at all. But then his phone buzzed. "Thank you for telling me. I had no idea. I need time to process this." Ethan didn't push further. He'd done his part. Now it was up to Claire to confront Liam. The fallout was swift. Within days, Liam's world began to unravel. Ethan wasn't privy to the details of Claire's confrontation with Liam, but he could imagine it. The accusations, the evidence, the lies Liam probably told in a desperate attempt to save himself. Whatever he had said, it hadn't worked. Claire had blocked Liam on social media and changed her relationship status to single. Her friends flooded her posts with supportive comments, confirming that the breakup was no secret. But Ethan wasn't finished. Liam had taken more from him than just his marriage. He'd stolen Ethan's peace of mind, his dignity. Exposing him to Claire was only the beginning. Ethan's next move was targeting Liam's professional life. As a tech salesman, Liam relied on his reputation and relationships to secure deals. Ethan knew that if the right people found out about Liam's behavior, it could cripple his career. Through careful research, Ethan identified several of Liam's colleagues and clients. He crafted anonymous emails to each of them, attaching screenshots of Liam's explicit messages to Sophie and framing the affair as a reflection of Liam's lack of integrity. Subject: concern about Liam, confidential. Dear recipient, I am writing to you anonymously because I feel it is important that you know about the actions of someone you work closely with, Liam. I have recently discovered that Liam has been engaging in an extramarital affair with my wife, all while maintaining a relationship with his girlfriend. I understand this is a personal matter, but I believe it speaks to his character and trustworthiness. Attached are screenshots of some of his messages as evidence. I leave it to your discretion how to handle this information. Sincerely, a concerned party ***. Ethan hesitated before sending the first email, but once he clicked send, it became easier. Over the next few days, he sent similar messages to multiple contacts, ensuring that Liam's duplicity couldn't be ignored. The results were exactly what Ethan had hoped for. Within a week, rumors about Liam's affair began circulating among his coworkers. Ethan heard from a mutual acquaintance that Liam's boss had called him into a meeting to address the allegations. While Liam wasn't fired outright, his reputation within the company was tarnished, and clients began requesting to work with other representatives. Ethan took a grim satisfaction in knowing Liam's professional life was crumbling. He imagined Liam sitting at his desk, his phone buzzing with texts from colleagues asking if the rumors were true, his manager glaring at him during meetings. It wasn't enough to erase what Ethan had been through, but it was a start. Liam tried to fight back, of course. He called Ethan one evening, his voice dripping with desperation and anger. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Liam demanded. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" Ethan's laugh was cold. "Oh, I know exactly what I've done. I've given you a taste of what you deserve. You're ruining my life," Liam shouted. "And you ruined my marriage," Ethan snapped back. "You didn't care about the damage you caused, Liam. So why should I care about you?" Liam sputtered, trying to form a rebuttal, but Ethan hung up before he could finish. He didn't owe Liam an explanation or a shred of sympathy. Ethan's final act of revenge was simple but devastating. He anonymously leaked the affair to Liam's wider social circle. Mutual friends, old acquaintances, and even family members received the screenshots and videos that exposed Liam's betrayal. The humiliation was complete. Liam became a pariah, ostracized by nearly everyone who once trusted him. For Ethan, it wasn't about pettiness or revenge for its own sake. It was about reclaiming control. Liam had taken so much from him, but now Ethan had taken something in return: Liam's reputation, his stability, his relationships. It wasn't a perfect victory. Ethan's marriage was still over, and the scars of Sophie's betrayal remained. But for the first time in months, Ethan felt like he could breathe again. In the end, Liam was left with nothing but the wreckage of his choices, while Ethan began the slow process of rebuilding his life. It wasn't justice in the traditional sense, but for Ethan, it was enough.